April, so good to see you. One of my favorite topics, 5 signs you are ready to retire early. Get the checklist out. As many as 54% of young or early retirees in Gen X report that they are considering unretiring. Their reasons for returning to work are both economic and emotional, according to a recent study from F&G Annuities and Life. So before you retire early, consider whether you meet these milestones. Number 1, you are debt free. Does this include your mortgage?
It can. This is one where, I never like to use the blanket statement that it
Yeah.
depends, but it just does depend. It depends on how much guaranteed income that you have from sources like pension, Social Security, annuity income, and it depends on what your overall expenditures are. If your mortgage is a very low payment, comparatively speaking to the remaining expenses that you have, if you're living well within your means and you have sufficient retirement income, it's not necessarily an end-all be-all to have your mortgage paid off for retirement. In fact, there might be instances where it makes sense not to do that, to keep a higher level of liquidity if you have a very low interest payment and it's not a burden and will not be a burden on you, then I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
It really is an individual analysis that needs to take place there. Now, when we come to other types of debt, like student loans, other types of high interest debt, those really should be paid off before you retire. Or perhaps, a hybrid retirement could be an approach where maybe you're not working in your career job anymore. Maybe you don't need as much income as you did in the past, but you do have certain strategies in place to ensure that that debt is paid off and paid down before you stop receiving earned income.
And next, if you are retiring early, you won't want to tap your retirement accounts just yet. So having multiple income sources becomes really important.
Right. When we just talked about, for example, pension, Social Security, annuities, 3 of the most common sources for guaranteed lifetime income type of sources that will last as long as you do. And also from a tax perspective, the more that we can build a diversified approach to the taxes that we're going to be paying in retirement, making sure that whenever possible, all sources are not going to be taxed equally. In other words, all sources won't be taxable, is ideal, that there's some form of an income stream that's not going to be taxed in retirement. Means that you need a lot less to live off of when you do retire, because you don't have to pay yourself and pay Uncle Sam on all of your income sources. So having diversified approach can really improve that probability of success, particularly when we're talking about an early retirement.
And you'll also want strong retirement savings. So prior to retiring, taking advantage of those catch-up contributions can certainly help.
Yes, absolutely. Looking at those catch-up contributions that can be made. That's another source where you can also look to inside of your employer plan if there are Roth options that are available. It's something that you often have to really seek out yourself, that no one in HR is really going to reach out to you and say, hey, did you know that there's a Roth option that you can contribute to here and start building some wealth in that tax-free category as well? That can make a big difference over time. Even if it seems to be a nominal figure on a year-over-year basis, it can really add up and help build that tax-free bucket for you to tap into in retirement, which again, when you don't have to pay yourself and Uncle Sam, you need less.
Right. Number 4 here, very tricky. Make sure you have a plan and savings for healthcare. What are a few options?
This is a really tricky one right now with so much that's up in the air, and it's a very scary place for a lot of people to be in with all of those question marks that surround healthcare. Whenever you're available, whenever you have an HSA available to you and you can afford to contribute to it, the triple tax benefit there is something that's incredibly difficult to beat. So building that up to help prepare you for those expenses on down the road is a great strategy. Of course, looking at options that are available to you on the healthcare exchange. There are other options that are available as well that I always encourage people to look into and that I use personally that are, for example, Christian-based ministries that are shared expenses. They're not traditional insurance. There are certainly pros and cons to them. They're not for everybody, but it is an avenue for some people who, for example, don't have a lot of pre-existing conditions, a lot of existing prescriptions that are expensive. Often a little bit of a younger demographic is where that can be a fit when the premiums and other expenditures for traditional health insurance are cost prohibitive. That can also be another option that can make a lot of sense to look into.
Interesting. All right. So we've talked about the finances. Let's talk about the emotional component. More than 40% of early retirees said they miss the challenge and stimulation of work in their daily lives. That's again, according to F&G Annuities. So before you retire early, know how you are going to create that challenge outside of the workplace, including strong social connections, daily structure, and a sense of purpose.
I think, sometimes, oftentimes, what I see is that people have their identity so tied into what they do for a living. It
Absolutely.
really
Yeah.
becomes who they are. So the more that we can spend time while we are still working, and this is kind of me even speaking to myself here, but while we are in our working years, really doing those hobbies and spending time building and strengthening those social connections, family and outside of family, making sure that passions that are outside of your work. So if you're, charitably inclined, if you're philanthropic, where is your heart? Outside of what you're doing for a living. And, of course, you're blessed to be able to be in a position like I consider myself to be, where this is where my heart is. But if this isn't what I was doing, I need to also take a close look at what is it that I would be doing with my time, and spend some of the time that I have now in those areas, because it
Mhm.
is important for us to not have too much of our identity, so to speak, tied to our work, or it can be a very difficult emotional transition
Right.
to retire. And I encourage people all the time to think about that emotional component and to start preparing themselves for that early, because for some people, it's that switch is flipped and they're done and they're so happy and they live a long and happy retirement, and other people feel very lost. So kind of identifying where you are on that spectrum with your identity, with who you are, with what makes you happy, and makes you who you are, identifying those things as early as you can and really honing in on those areas can make a tremendous impact for that transition to and through retirement.
hmm And talking this through, April, it becomes apparent that it might not be that you need to check off all five of these. Like if you have that passion job that provides healthcare too, and just a little bit of income. So there's so many ways to go about this, but I know, again, this is what you specialize in. If somebody would like to sit down with you to determine if they are ready financially and emotionally to retire early, how can they get a hold of you?
We're happy to help begin those conversations, and just recognizing that it is a process, not one
Mhm.
conversation, but it all starts with one conversation. And you can reach us at either office or any time of day on our website, theretirementfamily.com, through the contact us form. And we're happy to help you start navigating that journey.
Great. April, thank you.
Thank you, Erin.